Welcome to the Flywheel training course. My name is Tim Karen. One thing that I wanted to get across in this whole course is the fact that there's probably a lot of gaps and there's probably a lot of blind spots in your programming. Most of the resistance we work with is going to be gravity based. This is time tested and proven. As we will talk about throughout the course, is going to be some sort of acknowledgement that not all resistance has to be in the form of gravity. And we deal with this a lot of maybe potentially in our own settings right now, even if without a flywheel or any isokinetic kind of machinery, is things like pneumatic resistance from Kaiser, or even looking at cable columns, which are still going to be gravity based, but use cams and levers to create more horizontal resistance profiles. And that little bit of sliver of maybe a nuance or something that's missing within your program can have a huge difference in creating more robust, capable athletes. Specifically, because we work in a three-dimensional world. Everything is more than what the eye really can see and determine. And having just a little bit more tools in the tool belt to accentuate certain areas or develop certain aspects from an athletic profile can make a huge difference in the long run from a strength conditioning perspective, as well as just potentially diversifying your portfolio of your skills and tool set. So hopefully this course will illuminate some of these blind spots that you have. You can do some unpacking of that. You can start to look at where are the things that I'm coming up short with and how can I close that gap with a traditional resistance profile that's gravity based, or maybe I need to make that investment in talking a little bit more about flywheel. This course is brought to you by Kratos, which to me is just the Mercedes Benz of flywheel. Like the thing that you'll find about flywheel, it's unique, it's really interesting. So there's a learning curve aspect, but then there's also the design, the engineering, the architecture of the actual flywheel unit. And one thing that you're going to feel right away is this thing is pretty intense. And the harder you pull, the more the resistance, the more the potential velocity, all sorts of really unique aspects, but the actual design of the flywheel unit can break down pretty easily if it's not well constructed or engineered. And I think that's where Kratos really steps up. And my opinion on Kratos is it's battle tested, designed by engineers and really high level, skilled, powerful athletes. They're going to put some pretty big damage on some of these pieces of machine. The example I always think about is when you have a muscle beach or injury workout during football practice and you bring out some assault bikes, and it comes really quick that these guys can get out of the conditioning if they really crank on the arms. And you're down an assault bike because these guys are really strong and powerful because they get savvy to the fact that, yeah, the harder I push, the less I got to do. And that the same thing for a lot of different unique pieces and tools. And I'm not saying athletes are going to be, this kind of like manipulative or a person that's going to try to get out of hard work. But it's not too shocking to realize that if an athlete really pushes hard or exerts their true potential, that they can do some serious damage. And Kratos, it's battle tested. I've yet to see a person really be able to damage that unit and not being reckless with it. Not like saying we're releasing a Kaiser unit and smacking into the interface and breaks that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking an athlete really putting some effort behind that exercise and just the system breaks. Where Kratos is pretty dang durable, man, and it's pretty versatile and it's going to have a lot of function. And it's intuitive, it's simple to use. It has a great actual coil system where it can change the length of that tether. It's just a really well-designed unit. And there's a lot of optionality now too between a travel unit, a vertical unit, the base unit, the hybrid between the vertical unit and the base unit, a more compact transport or portable one. The tools are now there for us to be able to implement flywheel within our training setting, but not limited by the quality. So Kratos is going to be a really good resource for you guys to look into. Way this course is going to break down, I'm going to break it down into 5 sections. We're going to look at force velocity profiling. And this is the foundation of really understanding isokinetic or flywheel anti-gravity type of resistance. So as we start to understand what is the limiting factor here, we're going to have a tool that's malleable to whatever that person needs in that moment and not having to prioritize one versus the other. We're going to look at testing or practical applications of testing because the thing that we'll talk about as we go through flywheels, when do we insert this? When is gravity-based stuff no longer effective or obsolete to developing an athlete? We're going to look at a big value add specifically for flywheel because it's not gravity-based in terms of multi-planar, the 3 cardinal planes, sagittal, transverse, and front. And if I look at my programming, a lot of it's going to be vertical, vector, and sagittal orientation. And that's okay because gravity is going to have the highest resistance when it's perpendicular to the ground or the surface below you, where flywheel is not really built that way. The resistance profile is consistent. It doesn't matter its perpendicularness to gravity. It's always going to be a uniform high level resistance. And that lends itself to different planes and the vectors as well. So you have vertical, horizontal, and rotational vector. You can hit all planes and vectors through a consistent and unique resistance profile that's not limited to gravitational constraints. We're going to look in contraction type. So the other big part is eccentric overload. There's a delayed eccentric and there's an eccentric overload we'll talk about a lot during this course. And as we start to think about, hey, well, I need to develop the complete contraction type. And one of the foundational principles we talk about is all gravity-based resistance is limited by whatever your concentric ability is. If you can't overcome that external load based off of gravity, you can no longer lift it. Well, that's not longer part of the equation here with flywheel. That eccentric overload based off of how much concentric effort I'm going to pull now can be accentuated and I can develop simultaneously full eccentric contraction profiles and developing concentric ability and not being limited. And then the final aspect, we'll look at program reviews. We'll break down 3 different types of programs: a potentiating strategy of using flywheel in terms of creating more activation, potentiation, going into ballistic exercises or plyometric exercises or high rate of force development exercises. We'll look at hypertrophy, which the consistency of tension through a now uniform and maximal loaded movement with isokinetic and flywheel, that will have a huge impact on overall hypertrophy and muscle growth based off of way more lactic acid in the cities produced during some of these contractions. And then the final one, we look at energy system development, which is a huge asset for any flywheel because we can modulate the intensity based off how hard I'm pulling. So if I start to fatigue, I pull a little less hard. And all of a sudden now I can keep a set going longer through the entire bout or duration of whatever work to rest ratio I'm trying to work. So 30 on, 30 off, or 45, 15 off. That kind of breakdown is not going to be limited by my resistance profile from gravity. I can really push through and finish off a set or a duration throughout the entirety. The last piece I want to talk about in this introduction is this convergence, that gravity-based movements really kind of force you to pick some sort of input, or whether it's going to be force, or whether it's going to be work, or whether it's going to be velocity. You almost have to pick your horse before you start to push through. When you start to do an inventory of what is my limiting factor here? Okay, well, they're weak, so I need to develop force. They're slow, I need to develop velocity. They're out of shape or they're deconditioned, I need to focus on work. And with gravity-based things, you almost have to pick that before you have to. Where flywheel kind of takes that away, that you don't have to pick, that you can be malleable to that environment, what that person needs, and the quality control therefore goes up. And we'll work through how this unique resistance is going to allow you to continue and develop things more so than you would with gravity or gravity-based resistance. And that's going to have a huge impact on your programming. So as we're breaking down, hey, when do I want to really think about inserting flywheel into my training? It's that, okay, well, if you need to work on multiple things, and we've kind of worked through this in multiple different ways. We do mixed method, where there's a concurrent strategy of having a focal point of a quality on working an individual day, like a power day or a force day or a hypertrophy day or work capacity day. Or we look like at a mixed method where we have a conjugate breakdown of working multiple qualities within one session, like a velocity, a force, or work. That all has big meaning and big impact. And there's been really good programming that's developed high level athletes because of it, where flywheel can cover all those things. We'll talk about a lot about inertia. We'll talk about velocity and the intent behind that. We'll talk about the difference between a big wheel and a small wheel and the momentum that creates. And the management of the momentum really creates this either high work or high velocity, but it's interchangeable in that moment of just go a little bit slower, try to exert a little bit more force, or try to go down really fast and see how that reactivity comes out from it. And it becomes extremely utilitarian in that moment for that person based off of what they need. And then look at the energy systems between phosphagen system, glycolytic system, and oxidative system. Again, that I can modulate the intensity on the fly, and I can push someone to those work capacities in that moment. And when I start to break down, like looking at energy system profiling, and we look at the power and the capacity continuum with each one of those energy systems, a lot of it really comes down to the simple fact of we are going to be limited by what that person could sustainably do at a high quality throughout the entirety of that bout or the duration of that set. And with Flywheel is we can immediately modulate the intensity by pulling a little less, and we can get them through to that work capacity that we need. And the intensity or the intent behind that is going to be uniform because it's what you got. You look at a lot of like traditional principles like high intensity training and talking about going to complete muscle failure. And you work with a coach that maybe does really good manual resistance or understands how to accommodate a strength curve really well. And one of the things that you see is they push them to complete volitional effort and complete failure for both concentric, eccentric, and even the third part would be isometric. And they have this incredible like intuition about loading a muscle or taking a movement pattern to complete muscular exhaustion, where a lot of that is really tied into Flywheel organically. And it's this intimate relationship you have with that resistance that allows that athlete to continue a set further past what they're normally capable of doing. I'm super excited about this course. I'm really thankful for Kratos and their support and them be able to really give us a great tool to close these gaps and fix these blind spots within our program. There's going to be a lot more questions than probably answers. And I want you to know that's a good thing. I want you to think about as we start to unpack and really discover the best way to train our athletes is this realization that the more you know, the probably less that you actually think you actually really know. It's an effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the process of learning more is met with the feeling of knowing less. And as we look at something like Flywheel, unless you have a background in physics or engineering, you're probably going to look at this as like, all right, this is pretty unintuitive, and I'm going to have to almost just re-engineer the way I think about things. And that's a good thing right now, no matter what stage you're at in your career, whether you're just entering the strength and conditioning field, you're a veteran, the point being is just constant growth and evolution is going to be met with the feeling of, all right, I feel like I know less than I started. That's just a start. And then you get in there and you practice and you rep it and you start to find, okay, there's some limitations in my program here. This would be a good spot to enter. And then we get into the practical considerations of where do I put that in the weight room? What kind of athletes do I use it? Is it applicable to all athletes or just certain types of athletes? Is an amazing level of information that you're going to unpack. But my hope for this course will allow you to start asking better questions and dig a little bit deeper into the direction that you feel like you need to go. So really excited about this course. Again, thank you to Kratos. Thank you for everything that they're doing. I'm excited. Let's get into it.